It could have all been prevented. All you had to do is let me see my kid. Now you're never gonna see her again.
What's even more terrifying than a serial killer is one who shows no remorse or guilt for their actions. While some try to seek redemption, there are others who completely lack empathy. These remorseless killers never apologize for their crimes and often display horrifying behavior during their trials.
And I am not sorry for the things I did do.
Without law enforcement intervention, it's likely that these merciless killers would have continued their crimes indefinitely. So, join us as we explore 15 most dangerous convicts who showed no remorse in court. Number 15. Diane Downs. Diane Downs is one of the most infamous criminals from the past century. She was born in 1955, and by 1983, she had committed her most notorious crimes, shooting all 3 of her own kids, and then herself, through the arm. She then brought them to the hospital, where her daughter, Cheryl, was pronounced dead. Her other 2 kids, Christy and Danny, were severely injured. But things weren't quite adding up for the police. When she arrived, she told doctors and police that she had been carjacked by a man who shot her and then attacked her kids.
He did not take time to point the gun and shoot me, obviously because he would have shot me the same way he did the kids.
She claims she pretended to throw her keys, and the man went to look for them, giving her the opportunity to escape. But when police went to the scene and looked over the physical evidence, there was no sign of an adult man or anyone other than Diane and her kids ever being there. Diane was also in possession of the weapon. Diane was arrested, and just in time for her trial, her daughter Christy recovered enough to testify. She described in detail that her mother pulled over and committed these assaults. Diane has been in prison since her conviction. She has been recorded in interviews laughing about the situation. She claims her innocence to this day. Her motive was likely trying to get rid of her parental responsibilities so she could live a carefree lifestyle with the married man she was having an affair with. Number 14. Isabel Martinez. Did you know that out of all crimes that involve a parent taking the lives of their children, only 5% are committed by women? Isabel Martinez is one of those women. A few days before she would steal her kids' and husband's lives, she was mourning the death of her father. She and her father had been close, even practiced religion and magic together. She was afraid her dad was sent to hell after he passed, and she was tormented by the thought. This seems to have been the catalyst to her crimes. One night, Isabel calmly and confidently went through her house, attacking everyone inside. Her 9-year-old daughter, Diana, was the only one who survived. Her other children, Axel, Dillian, Dakota, and Isabella, were all slain, as was Martin, her husband. Her kids were aged 2 through 10. You'd think that after coming back to reality after doing this, Isabel would be horrified. Well, it doesn't appear that she ever came back to reality. Honestly, her behavior in court supports this idea. Isabel was photographed in a prayer pose, giving a thumb up, and generally just hamming it up to the cameras. She never showed any emotion for her family. Number 13. Alan McCarty. Alan McCarty certainly showed emotion in court, but it was exactly the opposite of remorse. In fact, it was his outburst in a different court of law that landed him in front of a different judge. Alan went to court during a custody battle, and the judge, Stasia Warren, ruled against him. In response, Alan threatened her life. That threat would earn him a 20-year prison sentence, but he didn't stop there. When the next judge, Matt Foxman, gave him his sentence, Alan lost his temper again. He spewed obscenities at the judge, claimed to be afraid for his life, and berated his own lawyer.
I refuse. He threatened to duct tape me. I refuse.
Due to his history of disruptive behavior in court, that was what he was on trial for after all. Judge Foxman threatened to have Alan's mouth duct taped shut for the entirety of the trial. Now that's something you definitely don't hear about every day.
Move from this room. The judge threatened my life. I am scared. I want to be removed.
Alan was shocked by this and claimed that since he has asthma, he wouldn't be able to breathe, and asked to be removed from the courtroom for his own safety and well-being. Alan's mother was the only person in her son's corner, but even she refused to make a statement in court in her son's defense. Alan is currently imprisoned. Number 12. Derek Franklin Williams. Derek Williams was sentenced to 65 years behind bars back in 2014. He maliciously stole the life of his own wife, the mother of his 2 sons. He then turned the gun on himself, but survived. And what's even crazier is that this was the first time Derek showed violent tendencies, and in court he didn't repent the loss of his wife one bit. In fact, this attack was premeditated. All of this started when Derek's wife, Kim, filed for a dissolution of their marriage. Derek wasn't concerned about losing his life partner, but he was concerned about what that meant for his retirement money. So, one night after he came home, He waited until his sons were in bed and then attacked his wife. His older son, who was just 13, heard the commotion and came out of his room onto the scene. He was the one to call the police and stay with his younger brother, who was just 6. In court, Derek did not appear upset or guilty. He probably didn't expect to still be around, since he had not expected to survive the self-inflicted wound. This is absolutely a case of a very sick man who was good at hiding his violent tendencies until it was too late. Number 11. Ronnie O'Neill. Kenyatta Barron and her 2 children lived alone after Ronnie O'Neill had left his family. After a long and contentious relationship, Kenyatta decided she was better off without Ronnie in her or their kids' lives. But when Ronnie came to her, wounded and homeless, she decided to take him in out of the goodness of her heart, and Ronnie repaid her by taking her life and their daughter's life. His daughter was 9 years old and suffered from cerebral palsy. Ronnie was deemed fit to stand trial and even represented himself in court, showcasing his mental capacity. All he said was that he loved Kenyatta and his kids more than anything in the world. Apparently, this was a case of, if I can't have you, no one can, since Kenyatta didn't want to take him back as a romantic partner. Number 10. Jesse Pomeroy. Jesse Pomeroy remains one of the most confusing convicts in American history. The first known attacks that Jesse carried out were when he was just 12 years old. Young children started to suffer attacks in his neighborhood. These attacks were described as brutal and excessively violent. His family moved, and then attacks started in his new neighborhood, leading to his arrest. Because Jesse was so young, he was sent to a boys' home for troubled kids. When he was 14, he was allowed to return to his mother. But that's just the beginning. After he was released from the boys' home, he went back to his old ways. But this time, children were going missing. He was arrested again, and this time put on trial. The judge and the prosecutor didn't want to ever let this pint-sized sociopath see the light of day again. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in jail. You'd think that a child would break down in court, being accused and tried for such terrible crimes. But Jesse didn't. He showed no remorse or even a reaction to what was happening around him. Can you believe a child could do something like this and act that way afterward? It's mind-boggling to consider how evil humans can be, especially kids. Number 9. Stephen Griffiths. Between 2009-2019, Stephen Griffiths took the lives of multiple workers in Yorkshire, England. He spent his early life idolizing famous mass killers and studied criminology in school. He even wrote his PhD on the topic. When he did begin acting on his sick fantasies, he chose a very distinctive weapon, a crossbow. He used this weapon to carry out each of his crimes. Like Gary Ridgway, Stephen felt as though he was cleaning up the streets of his community by targeting sex workers. When Stephen was finally caught, the police found books in his home about dismembering human bodies. And at trial, he showed absolutely no remorse for what he'd done. In fact, he seemed proud. This story serves as a painful reminder of how dangerous it is when young people idolize criminals, especially when they become this obsessed. Number 8. Jamie Osuna. Like this terrifying individual, our next criminal has an affinity for, well, disguises. He also took the life of a mother, Yvette Pena. Meet Jamie Osuna, the man with 1,000 faces. Although unlike our clown friend wearing face paint, Jamie's are actually tattooing. And the woman that he killed had 6 children. He not only took her life, he assaulted and dismembered her. Jamie was a very disturbed man who once said, "I recognize myself as one who is not afraid to indulge himself without the consequences and let society mold him into. As laws change, and as society changes, people change with it. I'm a self-made man, and I'm proud of it." Jamie initially pleaded not guilty to his crime, despite his history and appearance. However, shortly after arrest, he changed his plea to guilty. And this wasn't some way of showcasing his guilt over what he'd done, or an effort to spare Yvette's family a trial. No, it was because he was sick of staying in jail, and he wanted to just go to prison.
I don't have no sympathy. I'm sadistic. I really don't care. I'll do it and I'll do it again over and over and over.
During the trial, he smiled and laughed, to the horror of the judge and prosecutors. He was even seen yawning widely, as if bored. Number 7. Gary Leon Ridgway. Gary Ridgway is a next-level criminal. To everyone who knew him before his arrest, he was just a regular guy. Police were baffled when sex workers started being attacked in the 1990s in Seattle. Initially, Gary was very good at covering his tracks. He would clip his victims' nails after dumping their remains to remove any of his DNA from under them. But he attacked so many sex workers that the evidence eventually caught up with him. He was arrested in November of 2001, and his wife left him shortly after. While in court, gruesome details emerged, including the fact that he had a habit of violating his victims' bodies after they'd passed away. Gary had an unfathomable rage toward all women, but sex workers were his victim of choice. He told investigators that he thought of these women as garbage, and that he was helping the police by cleaning up the streets. In court, Gary was stone cold with one exception. However, he was upset because he left evidence and now he was going to go to jail. He felt nothing for his victims. Truly a disgusting man. Number 6, Michael Elijah Adams. Sometimes people are born bad, and when a bad person is born into a bad environment, you have a recipe for disaster. Michael Adams, or Dirty Mike, as he likes to be called, is one such person, and disaster indeed occurred. Michael started his life of crime at just 14 to escape his abusive childhood home. He started hopping trains and dealing substances. He describes this time of his life as carefree. Soon after, he started initiating conflicts with other vagrants he met along the way. He took some of their lives. While the number of his victims is hotly debated, according to Michael himself, he has taken between 16 and 30 lives. When he finally got caught, Michael wasn't shy about telling officers everything he'd done. He even kept track of his alleged victims with tattoos, one for each. And if you couldn't guess already, he did not show a single sign of guilt during the trial process. He often smiled in court, smugly. He also told reporters that he looked forward to his next stint in prison because, according to him, he had made various deals with the police to make his stay more comfortable. He also referred to going to prison this time as retirement. I guess that's one way to make the best of your situation. Number 5, Michael Swanson. Meet Michael Swanson. According to his parents, Michael desperately needed mental health intervention. They said that if he had gotten help sooner, he wouldn't have done what he did. Michael was once in the care of a psychiatrist when he was sentenced to the Hennepin County homeschool, and apparently that wasn't enough. As a toddler, he would steal knives from the family kitchen and stab furniture. His parents recall having to keep knives out of reach for essentially his whole life. So, his parents may have a point in that intervention, may have helped, but the group home also didn't appear to help, so who knows if it would have even made a difference. Just a few years after Michael was released from the group home, he lived up to what was unfortunately his full potential. He stole his parents' Jeep and went on a crime spree that included attacking and taking the lives of 2 convenience store clerks. He was arrested, and his behavior didn't change at all. He smiled at witnesses in court. Despite his parents claiming otherwise, Michael was found to be sane and capable of knowing right from wrong by a court psychiatrist. This is a terrible story of someone who was simply born bad. Number 4, Danta Wright. When Danta Wright was read his sentence of 25 to 52 years, he was all smiles. What's even scarier is that Danta never denied his crime.
I'll be home soon, R.I.P. Keon, I love my family.
He pleaded guilty and was therefore spared a trial. However, when given the option, the family of Danta's victim decided to forego their right to reject the sentencing in favor of a trial. Danta took the life of Jordan Klee during a botched robbery. Apparently, Jordan didn't have any cash, and out of fury, Danta took his life instead. The judge was so disgusted with the convict's attitude that he nearly withdrew the plea himself. He said, "Watching you sit there, smile and laugh, and shake your head like this was no big deal, I'm very tempted to just say, I'm not going to accept this sentence agreement. We'll go to trial, and if you're convicted of felony, you'll go to prison for the rest of your life.
If you're convicted of felony murder, you'll go to prison for the rest of your life.
That means you'll die there. That's what I'm tempted to do." At this point, Jordan's mother began weeping again, no doubt terrified that she would soon need to endure a criminal trial. The judge also noted that he had never rejected a plea deal before. Danta ended up squeaking by on his plea and didn't go to trial. 25 to 52 years is nothing to sneeze at, but we can't help but wish that he had been sentenced to life. Number 3, Randall Moore. A devastated, tearful Sheila Lynch said in court, "What you did to my daughter was evil, hateful, and despicable. You couldn't destroy her spirit, so you took her life instead." Sheila was facing the person who ended the life of her daughter, Randall Moore. You would think that hearing this statement would upset Randall, or at least make him question himself on his choices. But instead, he was irate and yelled back at Sheila. He would later tell the court that he had no remorse for ending her life.
And I'll tell you point blank, I have not 1 ounce of remorse for Therese Ann's death.
Randall Moore was once married to Therese Ann, and the couple had a child together. He was a violent, abusive man, and so when Therese Ann had enough, she filed a protective order against him and left him. Randall wasn't upset about losing his wife, but he was upset that he could no longer see his son. That's when he decided to kidnap and attack Therese Ann for revenge, and when she was screaming for help during the attack, an officer arrived to see what was wrong. Randall shot him, nearly taking his life too. The judge overseeing this case made a point to say just how deplorable he found Randall, and wished he could have given him a harsher punishment than the 3 life sentences plus 25 years he sentenced Randall to serve. Number 2, Scott Nelson. Scott Nelson is a man who has never been concerned with anyone except himself. That much was made crystal clear when he robbed and stole the life of Jennifer Fulford in cold blood. He told investigators that his reasoning behind this crime was to obtain enough money to flee to a different town, absconding from probation. He claims to have suffered abuse when he was previously in prison and wanted to avoid going back at all costs. So, he killed a woman. Makes sense, right? Did he accept his punishment and apologize to Jennifer's family? Of course not. He told the jury that he was nothing more than a homicidal maniac and that he should be sentenced to death. Instead, he was sentenced to serve life in prison. Now, if that's not ironic, I don't know what is. Number 1. Luis Bracamontes. In 2014, Luis Bracamontes made the fateful decision to open fire on police officers, taking the lives of 2 of them and injuring another along with a civilian. Luis was an undocumented Mexican living in the U.S. illegally and a career criminal. Luis is an extremely dangerous person, and the courts did not go easy on him on this last crime. He was given the death penalty. He behaved like a buffoon all throughout the trial, laughing and smiling during victim statements and the defense's testimonies. And while he was being sentenced, he smiled and clapped at the news that he would be put to death. Completely remorseless. That's all we have for today. If you want to see more popular videos we made, click one on the screen. Thanks for watching and see you next time.